Welcome back to my Asteroids and GameMaker series. We're moving on to the third chapter now, and in this chapter we are going to start actually creating asteroids and have the player be able to defeat them. So let's start with actually going through the standard workflow of creating a new object, loading some sprites, and then setting up the object. So over in our sprites area, we will want to actually create a new folder for our asteroids. So I'm going to right click that and create a group called Asteroids. And I'm going to import, I'm actually going to create a lot of sprites for my asteroids because I want to be able to randomly pick. So I have several different sprites for each asteroid type. So we're going to create a new sprite. And this will be called SPR underscore asteroid underscore big underscore A. Now, I normally wouldn't use all these underscores, but GameMaker prefers that as the naming convention. I'm more used to camel case styles. So we have SPR asteroid big A here. We're going to go to import, and we're going to jump over to enemies, asteroids, and we're going to start with asteroid big A. The scale should be scaled up a little bit because I do think this is going to be a little too small for our game. So let's click on the 4 arrows, and we could scale it up with pixels or we could scale it up with percentage. I prefer to scale it up with percentage. And then we're just going to put 200 here so that it's going to double the size of this asteroid. If that ends up being too big, we can always go back through and this process and maybe only do 150% scale of this. So then we hit OK, and then this is our new asteroid size, about 84 by 92. Don't forget to center the origin. And then we have to decide on the collision mask. So if we expand up collision mask, we can see it's defaulting to a rectangular collision mask. I'm going to choose ellipse. Now, there is an argument for precise, but the way that I'm going to set up the collisions with these asteroids, my concern with precise is that the asteroid's going to be spinning in the world, and as it's spinning, the hitbox isn't really a smooth-edged hitbox, so it could snag onto things. So I think for how I'm envisioning setting this up, if I use an ellipse hitbox, it's going to actually have overall a smoother behavior for collisions. So choose ellipse, and even with small imperfections like this, the player's not going to notice that during the actual game time. So once we're happy with that, we can close out of it. Now, to create future ones, I think the quickest way is to just duplicate it and rename it to Asteroid Big B. Then double click it so that we can change the sprite if we go to import. Now, I do believe I have the 2x versions here, so we could actually just load up Asteroid Big B 2x, and that's already pre-scaled to be the correct size here. Middle center is what we want, and it's going to remember that we still want an ellipse hitbox, so we don't have to change those settings if we just click on duplicate every time. So I'm going to also do this for 4 small asteroids. So I'm going to start by duplicating big A, and it will be called SPR asteroid small A. And I'm going to load in by clicking on import. I'm going to load in asteroid small a, the 2x scaled one. We have our graphic. And again, remember, it's already remembering all of our settings, so we don't really need to change any of that. So I'm going to duplicate this and create small b. Double click it. Change the image by clicking on import. Repeat the process for small c. and then one more time to finish up small d. And so these will be the sprites that we use for all of the asteroids. Now, we're only going to have 2 objects, technically 3, and we're just going to randomly choose the sprite, which is going to be a really kind of cool way to set up. And so we don't have to make 4 different objects for the small asteroids. We will just randomize which sprite it's going to load. So we've got all this finished. So we're good with our sprites for now. So we can minimize that. Then over in objects, I want to start setting up the asteroid. And I want to do this similar to how I did the player's weapons, where I used parenting, because the asteroids, the big asteroid and the small asteroid, are going to have very similar behavior. I figure it would be easiest to program this with a parent object and just have the very minute differences in the children versions of those objects. This will also make all of our code easier to update for if the player collides to an asteroid, if an asteroid collides with an asteroid, it'll be very easy for us to update a lot of this code. So we're going to create a group called enemies. And inside of that group, I'm going to create a new object, and this will be called obj_asteroid. Maybe I could call it _parent to signify that this is a parent object and this is not meant to actually be placed in the world. And hopefully that would be implied by the fact that it doesn't have a graphic. So we could just call it obj_asteroid parent so that we know that this is meant to just be the parent object. So let's program all of the effects into here. And then all of our children asteroids will just inherit these properties, and it will be a very easy setup for us. So let's create some instance variables by clicking on variable definitions. First instance variable I'm going to create is a maximum hit points. We're going to set it to 40. We're kind of setting these values assuming we're creating the large asteroid first. Then I'm going to create another variable called current hit points, and I'm going to set that to 40 as well. Another variable called initial, how did I spell that? Initial_max_velocity. And this is going to be, I don't believe there's an I in initial. Oh, there is 3 I's in initial. So initial max velocity, this is going to be the fastest this asteroid can move when it spawns. Initial_min velocity. And this will be the slowest this asteroid can move when it spawns. Humorously enough, this is kind of breaking my rules of not naming variables things that you can't spell reliably. So yeah, that's calling it initial is not the greatest thing. Then we're going to need a score value. We're not going to use score value. That's a high score value. Score_value. That's weird that it's. By clicking enter, it's auto-completing this. So instead of clicking enter, I'm just going to click off of it so that it doesn't auto-complete that. And this is going to be the number of points that this is going to be worth. I'm going to switch that to an integer, though, because I don't think points should be a decimal. Hit points, debatable whether that should be a real number versus an integer. Probably makes more sense as an integer, but we'll leave it as real for now. All right, so we've got this. Now let's go through and start creating the behaviors that this asteroid's going to need for it to take place in the game. So we'll start with the create event. And the create event happens when this asteroid first gets created. So that could be if the level loads, Or that could be if it gets spawned during gameplay, either from one of the other asteroids dying, or maybe we just spawn reinforcements. So this actually gets triggered either start of the room or when it first gets created. So this method is going to set up things such as the hit points, the direction, the speed. So let's go and do that. Set current hit points to max hit points. This is probably not needed, but all right. So we probably don't need hit points to be, because we're setting it over here, but it just has to be on the safe side to make sure that the current hit points are being set to the max hit points. We could do that. So then let's generate a random direction. Because when the asteroid spawns, it's going to need a random direction for it to travel in. So we will say direction equals I random underscore range 0, 359. Now I didn't do 360 because unlike most functions in most programming languages, this iRandomRange method is inclusive on both the 0 and the 359, meaning if I did 0 to 360, it would actually have a higher chance of generating going purely right because 0 is the same as 360. So iRandomRange actually is kind of unique in the sense that it is inclusive on this left endpoint and inclusive on this right endpoint. So I'll put a little note here and just mention that iRandomRange is for integers. And yes, direction can be a float. So if we wanted to, we could have just done this without the I in front of it and just done random range and had a decimal direction. I just wanted to demonstrate both types. So now we're going to generate a random velocity. And we're going to generate this as a floating point number. So we'll say var rand speed equals random underscore range I feel like that makes it a little weird. So random underscore range, parentheses, initial min velocity, comma, initial max velocity. So this will generate a random number in between these initial parameters, these instance variables that we set up. So then we'll set our speed to this random range, or to this random speed. Then I want to create a spinning effect to the asteroid. So you'll notice that I only set the direction equal to the direction I want it to travel. And that's because I want the asteroid to just spin as it's floating through space. So that's going to be an interaction with the image angle that we will see. So I want to create a variable here, and I'm going to create an instance variable for it called visual underscore spin, and it's going to set to 0, and it's a real number. And so over here, we're going to set the visual rotation spin to a positive or negative version of the speed. So we will say visual spin equals rand speed times. Now I'm going to use a ternary if statement just to demonstrate a kind of a quick way to make a positive or negative value. So times I random. So another usage of random, I random 1. So what that does is it generates between 0 and the thing I list here. So it's going to either be 0 or 1, which is a good way to do like a 50-50. So if that's equal to 0, then we will plug in a -1. Otherwise, we'll plug in a +1. Make sure I got all my closing parentheses lined up right here. Yep. And then in the children version of this, we will pick the sprite at random. So here is our create method. If you are concerned that this spin might be too fast, you can also multiply it by like 0.5 or another value here just to kind of make it a little bit less extreme, because I think it will be very quick. But this code right here randomly picks -1 or +1 to give it either a left rotation or a right rotation. So we're going to move over to the begin step next. And the begin step is going to be very simple. It's just going to spin the asteroid. So we're going to add an event, begin step, and then this will apply the visual spin. So all it's going to do is animate the spin by just saying image angle plus equals spin. So that's going to cause the asteroid to appear like it is rotating. And so this is enough for us to get the asteroids essentially working. So we're going to create the children version of these asteroids. We're going to create one for the big asteroid and one for the small asteroid. So, and then we'll revisit this and add some code to it. So we're going to create a new object under enemies. And I'm going to call this obj underscore asteroid underscore big. I am going to give it an initial sprite. I will randomly generate this sprite in the future, but I am going to give it a random initial sprite. So I'm going to pick this just asteroid big A. And then I'm going to choose parent, and I'm going to choose the object asteroid parent to be its parent. And you can see that it inherits this create step and this begin step. And also, if I wanted to overwrite any of my instance variables, you can see that it inherited those instance variables as well. And so I could change those if I wanted to. And I will want to change them for the small asteroid. So we're going to do this again to make a small asteroid. So we're going to create a new object, and this will be called obj underscore asteroid underscore small. And we're going to choose the small sprite this time. And whoops. Forget that it was an asteroids this time. So we'll just pick small a, which should be the first one, yes. And then same thing, we're going to tell this to inherit from the parent asteroid, and it's going to get its initial settings, but I am going to tweak the values here. So for example, I want its max hit points to start at maybe 15, and I want its current hit points to start at 15. I want it to be a faster asteroid, so maybe its initial max velocity is 5, and maybe its initial minimum velocity is 2.5, and it will be worth 150 points instead. So then all of these values will change during this create step that it inherited from the parents. Oh, you'll notice that I'm not allowed to change it. You can see there's a little lock icon right there because this is coming from a different object. So let's put these in the game world and see how they work. So if we jump over to room 1 by double left clicking it, make sure you have the instances layer selected, because if you have the background layer selected, it will not like you'll get this little red X as you try to drag and drop on. And then it will ask you to create another instances layer, which you really don't want to do because you don't want to have like a gazillion instances layer. So make sure you have the instances layer selected, and then you could throw a few asteroids into here. Then we can test it by hitting play. And then we notice that there is a crash. I misspelled my variable. It was not called spin, it was called visual spin. So we will hit abort and we will fix that. So we'll jump over to the parent to fix that, because that's where we're inheriting these from. So this was called visual_spin. Then we'll hit play. And we can see the asteroids are working. Now they don't screen wrap yet. We will definitely need to add that. And every time I hit R to restart, which was part of that game manager, we can see that they pick a different direction. Now the asteroids do not hurt me. They don't collide with each other. We can't damage them. We're going to get to that in another video. But we have asteroids. So the last thing I want to do is get them to screen wrap and then have them randomly pick a sprite. And that's a pretty quick affair. So let's get them to screen wrap first. That's kind of an important step. So make sure we have the object asteroid parent selected. And we're going to add a new event, and it will be an end step event. And in the end step, there's going to be a couple of things that we're going to have to do, but we'll start with our screen wrap. Eventually, this is going to include the hit point checks and any potential cooldowns or whatnot. So move_wrap true, and how far off the screen we want it to trigger at. So I'm just going to pick 2. You could pick 1 because I've been using 1 for a bit, but I think 2 is fine. You could potentially also make it like half of the sprite's width. And I guess there's something to be said for doing something like sprite_width divided by 2. But I think it's fine if we just do 2. And just keep it like this. So now they should screen wrap. And the other thing that I want to do is get them to randomly pick a graphic when they create. And this is going to be kind of interesting because we're going to see how to overwrite an existing inherited method. So we're going to go here. So jump over to the big asteroid. And then we're going to click Add Event and Create. Now what's kind of crazy about this is going to replace the existing one, but we can still run it if we just say events inherited. That's going to tell it to run the initial inherited event from the asteroid, but we can still overwrite this by saying, well, so we can then pick the sprite by saying sprite_index equals choose SPR asteroid big A, comma SPR asteroid big B. And so we can do this same thing for the small asteroid. And then it will still run all that initial stuff from the parent object by using event inherited. And then we will pick a random sprite. So I'm going to just copy and paste this to make my life a little bit easier. So we're going to go over to the small asteroid, do the same thing. We're going to replace the create event, and then paste this in here. But instead of using the big asteroid, we're going to use the small asteroid. And so there's 4 of these, so we're just going to do this out 4 times. So we've got sprite index equals choose SPR small asteroid A, small asteroid B, small asteroid C, small asteroid D. So when I hit play, my asteroids will still get their random speed inherited from the original thing, but every time I hit play, you can see that they might get a different sprite each time. So just looking at all the different asteroids, we can see different sprites. So we're going to end here. In the next video, we're going to set up some collisions with the asteroids and also get them to be able to react to the player laser. So I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.